Hey guys, here we are, exercise 3 for Adobe Illustrator. This will be our final one before moving on to our main project next week. What we're going to be doing next week is dealing with working with depth and perspective to create a environment using Adobe Illustrator, and I'll be showing you guys some examples of that in the next lecture. But for this project, what we're going to do is we're going to make a sphere and a cube using Adobe Illustrator. So this is going to draw on some of what you guys have learned previously, in addition to a couple new elements that I'm going to show you guys. So let's start with what I consider to be probably the easiest of the two, the sphere. So what I'm going to do is take a shortcut. I'm going to use the ellipse tool, the ellipse shape tool. I'm going to draw out my sphere. I'm going to assign it a color. You can use whatever color you'd like. No outline. We're going to make these as close to realistic looking as we can. So objects in real life do not have outlines. I'm going to leave one off. And to do that, you simply choose the outline and tell it none. You can do that in a couple different locations. So make sure you set no outline for it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do some modeling on this. We're going to show that light is actually hitting this from a direction, and part is going to be in the cast light, part is going to be in shadow. So what I'm going to do is use a gradient to illustrate that. So if you open the gradient palette, and if you don't see it, you go to Window, Gradient, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look for, just going to go with black and white. You can see it's applied itself to my outline, so I'm going to go back and remove that. Make sure I choose my fill color. My object is selected, and then choose it. And I'm going to adjust the angle on this till it gets where I'm looking for. You can sort of go in and play with this as well, adjust it to where you think it needs to be. And I'm gonna play with the colors on this. So I'm going to take this back up to my red color that I was dealing with. So I'm just going to remember those values: 100, 100, and 46. So I need the shadow end to be a little darker, so I'm going to darken that up. And as you can see, this is already starting to look a little bit more like an object that's three-dimensional rather than two-dimensional. So there's just a few other things we can do to sort of push this and make it look more like a three-dimensional object. One would be to add a shadow underneath this. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to grab my ellipse tool again, and I'm just going to stretch a shadow underneath this. And I'm just going to, let's see here. I'm going to go with no gradient on the shadow. So I'm just going to come back to here, shut that off, turn it back on, choose my move tool. You can see it's in front, so I'm going to move it behind using either going to Object and Arrange or using Command or Control and the bracket keys. So there's my cast shadow. I'm going to play with it a little bit to get it to my satisfaction. Maybe brighten it up just a little bit and darken it up maybe. There we go. And other thing I can do is the opposite end of this would be what's called a specular highlight, which sort of alludes to how reflective or how smooth the surface of the object is and whether or not it's catching a little highlight of light. So to do that, I'm going to grab my ellipse tool again, and I'm going to stretch out kind of an oval shape. I'm going to go back to my gradients, and I'm going to choose one that has transparency on it. So I'm going to go with this fading sky, and I'm going to change the type to radial. So this is going to be circular. And then what I'll do is modify my settings. I think what I'll do is I'll just go with a white highlight. I'm not certain on this, but some of you, depending on your version, may or may not have the ability to squish or distend this gradient. I have the option to do it, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. If not, just a regular circular surface highlight will do. So I've got that. I'm going to swing it around and position it close to where I think it would be picking that up. Maybe increase its size a little bit. So as you can see there, this is convincing enough to sort of allude to form and shape in three dimensions on something that's just 2D. And I'm doing this with just 3 shapes, all of which are made using our ellipse tool. So we've got our specular highlight, we've got our actual object, we've got our cast shadow, and it's just a gradient from a lighter color to a darker color to allude to some sort of light enacting on this form. So what I'm going to do is group that up, size that, kind of move that up and out of the way. I'll just place it off to the side here and drag it back later. So now for our next shape, the cube. So what I'm going to do is start out with a base shape, just like I did with the sphere. I'm going to draw myself a cube. I'm going to switch back from that gradient. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to want to make this look like it's 3-dimensional. So you can do that one of several different ways. Probably the easiest for me, I'm just going to do it how I would envision this happening in my head. I'm going to do this kind of as a 2-point, well, no, I'll just do this as a 1-point perspective kind of a deal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw out my base shape, and then I'm going to make 2 other shapes. So what I'll do is make a copy of this here and here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify these 2 shapes off to the side. So what I'm going to do is my direct select tool, I'm going to grab the two corners of this far side. So both are selected, you can see there. And I'm going to click and drag these. You can kind of see where I'm headed with this. And then I'm going to do the same with the top one. Click and drag, just bring it down. And what I end up with is this shape, which I can now then take and modify just slightly to get what I'm looking for in terms of a finished rendered cube. So other thing I'm missing here is my cast shadow. What I'm going to do is draw out a shape again, and I'm just going to modify this to suit my needs, to suit what I'm looking for. Going to move that back. And I'm going to need one more point on this, so what I'm going to do is go to my pen tool, choose the add anchor point tool, add a point, switch back to my direct select tool, and now I just need to darken up my shadow. And if I grab all this and move it up, and I'm just kind of eyeballing this. I'm not going to be too nitpicky with it. I'm just looking at enough to fool the casual observer. So what you can see here is something that's, kind of convincing. This looks three-dimensional. You can play with this further to try and get to that point where it's, a lot more convincing. You could, add a specular highlight, allude to the fact that maybe this is actually a very shiny cube of some kind. And you could even go a couple different directions with the perspective on this piece as well. So what you could do would be to go a completely different direction and do something with 2-point perspective, where say you might have some sort of setup where you're dealing with a shape in 2-point perspective, where you can actually utilize Pathfinder to whoops, cut that one a little close, literally. Modify this form in a way where it alludes to a different plane of view. So we've got this shape here, and what I would do then is utilize kind of a little bit of trickery with Pathfinder to make the other face of this this cube here. And what I actually will do is choose my main shape, make a copy just for the purpose of taking care of this Pathfinder shape that I'm going to need. So I save that off to the side, select both. I want to keep the overlap So I'm going to choose intersect. And then what I can do is just change my colors, position things, and what I'm left with is something that's, you know, pretty close in terms of how the geometry is working in perspective. And then it's just, you know, a few tweaks here and there to get what you're looking for. So there's a couple different solutions to this, at least in terms of the cube. You could try and do something funny with the sphere by making like an oval or maybe a jelly bean if you're feeling really ambitious. But it's entirely up to you guys. It's entirely your prerogative whether you want to do that or not. So as you can see here, these are our completed shapes. Save these as a JPEG, put them up in the forums. If you guys have questions or maybe you come up with something really interesting, put that up there as well. We'll take a look and sort of look at and see, you know, each of us have a different solution to this, or maybe a different take on the perspective. Have fun with the cube. You can, you know, do 2-3 point perspective, make it float in the air and cast a shadow underneath. All sorts of cool stuff. So go ahead and have fun with it, guys. I'll see you in the forums.